thank you so much for being with us and for answering our questions today. You talked about food waste, and I wonder how much food gets wasted in the U.S.?
Well, about 40% of the food that we produce in the United States goes to waste. 40%. So it's a very large number. And it's ironic because I think we often think of our food system as being highly efficient. The U.S. really prides itself on having a very efficient food system. And yet when you look at food through the lens of what gets wasted, it is not, in fact, as efficient as we might like to think.
It sounds like a big number. Where does it happen? Where does the food get wasted?
So food waste really happens from farm to fork, although it happens in different proportions in different part of our food system. So if you look at what happens in the field and on the farm, of that total food that gets wasted, of that 40%, a very small portion actually happens on the farm. A very small portion also happens in manufacturing and processing. But as you start to get closer to the consumer, you see more and more food waste. So in grocery stores, they account for about 10% of the food that gets wasted. Food service environments like hospitals and colleges, that accounts for about 10% as well. Now, the numbers get a little bigger. When you get to restaurants, that's about where 30% of our problem happens with food waste, and consumers account for 42%. So unfortunately, all of us who eat are really integral to the problem, and we're also integral to the solution.
You mentioned that one of the big issues for consumers is date labeling. Can you talk about why that's problematic?
Sure. So as consumers, when you get something that's in a package, it probably has a date label. And it might say sell by, it might say best by, it might say best if used by, it might say enjoy by, and then there's a date. And many people assume, and unfortunately it's pretty much universally not the case, but people assume that the dates mean that the food becomes unsafe after that date. And regularly, people will see the date and they'll just pitch it. Now, the reality, though, is, in fact, that those dates are not about food safety. Manufacturers do not put dates onto food that are about food safety. They don't want to make those stipulations. What the dates are about is about freshness or quality. And so what it means is if you use it by this date, the manufacturer will ensure that you have a top quality experience. After that date, the product may change a little bit in form or maybe color. Maybe it's a product that might separate a little bit. Maybe it would be a little bit less fresh. But it's not a date that's about food safety. But because people assume it's about food safety, folks will regularly just take stuff out of their fridge, they see the date, and out it goes. So it contributes to a lot of food waste in the home, and it also contributes to food waste with retailers and food service environments because they will also see that date, and they know that consumers don't want to purchase food that is expired, and so even a couple days before the date comes, they'll typically pull that food also from the shelf. So there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of waste that's associated with these date labels, which in fact are, at the federal level, completely unregulated other than infant formula.
Can you talk about some government policies that might reduce food waste?
Sure. So I think this piece around date labeling is a really good example because the labeling protocols could be made more consistent about how the dates are determined and the language that is used at very low cost. Right? And I think that could do a lot to help consumers have more clarity about what the dates mean and to not purchase and then throw out so much of their food. And that would be a good thing for consumers as well because a lot of people are spending a significant amount of money. On average, a family spends about $1,500 on food that they waste every year. So the numbers are significant and the dates are a piece of that. Now there are other things that the government currently is doing that are a step in the right direction. This summer, the U.S. government will release the first ever national goals to reduce food waste in the United States. They're going to be 15-year goals. They'll run out to the year 2030, and they're part of a much larger United Nations-led process to establish national goals around food waste reduction. And we are hoping that the federal government will be quite ambitious in how they set those goals and that there will be a robust process for really following up on them and making sure that as a society as a whole, we're able to achieve them. And that means changes on the farm, changes in manufacturing, grocery, restaurants, and certainly in the home too, for all of us as consumers.
Speaking of consumers, what can we do in our homes to reduce food waste?
Sure. Well, there are a couple reasons why folks often find themselves wasting food at home. One is we often buy too much and we often cook too much. So for instance, you might spend a lot of energy finding your coupons to go get a deal or maybe to get a 2-for-1 deal, but then are you actually using that food if you buy the extra big pack size? If you get 2 of something that's perishable, can you actually eat it while it's still good? So part of it is we need to just be a little bit more conscious about what we buy, maybe a little more planning, go to the store with a grocery list, some things like that, so that you buy what you can actually make use of. And then cook what you can make use of. And if you have extras, use leftovers. Make sure to eat them and don't let them go, turn into a science project in the back of your fridge. And then there are also things like having a part of your fridge where you put the things that you need to eat first, because they're most perishable. Right? Put them in a special spot so that that that's what you go to. And if you're going to cook that night, find a way to use some of those ingredients. So there are also things like even, figuring out when to put food into the freezer. And if you do get an extra big size of something that you can't use fast enough, pop it in the freezer and then it's ready for you when you're ready for it.
What can we learn from what other countries are doing?
Well, there's a lot of leadership internationally on this question about how do we waste less food. I would say that the British are really in the forefront, and for probably 10 years they have had really serious, well-developed national policy and a lot of collaboration with industry around how to reduce food waste. They've had a lot of programs, for instance, to help consumers waste less. There are agreements with the retail industry around how to waste less. There are federal policies that deal with a whole lot of different foods and different parts of the food system to help bring that food waste down. So the British have a lot to say for what they've done. The French, just in the last couple of months, have also released a very ambitious set of federal policies, proposals, to deal with food waste, again, all the way from farm to fork, to increase donations, to encourage donations by different actors, to encourage food that is wasted to be disposed of in ways that get it out of landfills and incinerators. And here in the United States, that's very important because about 95% of the food waste that we have is in fact going into landfills if it's going through municipal solid waste. So finding some alternatives for reducing less food in the first place, and if it does have to go to waste, to get it out of landfills is very important, and there's a lot of leadership that we can look to and learn from internationally.
Very good. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.